Hello, Level Xers. Welcome to the GDC Fireside Chat. You know me, I'm Jason VandenBerghe, your host. And I've got two illustrious guests with me today. First, Noah Falstein, who, for those of you who don't know, Noah is a member of the game design pantheon at GDC. He invented the games industry. I think that's part of, has been doing talks for a long time. Also, the reason I'm at Level X, Noah's fault that I'm at Level X. Noah often works as a recruiter for us, bringing in high-powered nerds. So good job. Welcome, Noah. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And we have a guest panelist, our local Level Xer, Shane Sicienski, who I ran into on the floor and started to share his notes with me. And I went, whoa. Those are awesome notes. Why don't you just come to the lecture, come to the debrief, come to the fireside chat, Shane, and we shall talk about this live, because you seem like you are really having a good time at this GDC conference. So we are here to debrief on the Game Developers Conference. For those of you that don't know, we were at the GDC 2 weeks ago. You may have seen, by the way, if you haven't seen Kayla's amazing video in general, I'm going to tell the story about that in a minute here. You should go and check that out. But I thought I would start, Shane, I would start with, because Noah, you and I are in old fart land. We're gonna talk about, back in my day, GDC used to be cool, and now it's kind of, I don't know, less cool or maybe more cool. I don't know. We'll do that part. That'll be the second half of the show. But I thought we would start with the new blood with Shane's experience, because Shane, this is your first time at GDC, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. This is my first time.
And what'd you think? Like, what was your experience like, man? Like, because remember, most folks here haven't been there. Like, what was it like?
All right. Well, I'll say this. I always wanted to go because I've been watching the talks that are posted online, and I find them very inspiring. So I really wanted to go, mainly to see some of the talks live and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure any talk you go to, when you go there, you can get an insight out of it. And I found that to be the case. So yeah, it was super fun. I don't live too far away, so the flight wasn't bad. The biggest pain point going there is waiting in line to get your badge, which
dude,
2.5 hours. We all had that experience, right?
The line this year, just so everybody knows, it was so bizarre, right, Noah? Getting your badge is not that big of a deal.
Never been this long, even close to this long before.
It's usually, and it was so hilarious too, because the problem was there was, as far as badge stations go, there were 85 people for getting your badge, like once you got to that point, but there were only 2 people checking for your COVID vaccinations, right? Like the COVID vaccination was this tiny little bottleneck, right? Yeah. And so everyone was jammed up on that.
It would have been so easy to just assign a couple other people. There are other doors even they could have used. Yeah, it seemed like a real failure.
They messed that one up for sure. But anyway, we got through it. So okay,
we got through it.
That was the pain point. But then you got your badge, and then what happened?
Yeah, I got my badge. If you've never been there, it's essentially like a block in San Francisco. They've got a couple different buildings on it. There's a north, a south, a west, and one of them has the expo, which is the floor that has all the various kiosks and stuff and people peddling their wares at you. And then there's another hall where you have all the talks, 3 floors. There's a cafe on it. You look at this big board, see what talks you want to attend. You also look them up beforehand, and you essentially just go see the talks. And then in between the talks, you meet with your friends and your colleagues and visit the expo. You go back to your hotel. And that's sort of the rough gist of what you did there.
Yeah.
But what I'm really excited about, like I said, were the talks. Were the talks?
Yes.
Yeah.
So give us your rundown. What did you see?
Yeah. I'll give you a rundown. And the main reason I want to give it to you all is because if any of you are interested in any of these topics that I'm about to talk about, hit me up and then we can talk about them in more detail, because I obviously can't summarize them all for you right now in all of their intricacy. And I already gave a spiel to the entire design department yesterday about some of them. So I offloaded a little bit on them. But
I will add really quick. everything that Shane's going to talk about, GDC is really good about putting all these lectures up. There is the GDC Vault Pass. There's some of the lectures are behind a paywall, but I have a Vault Pass and we can get you in there. It's fine, right? And most of them come out for free. So if you're interested in these talks, the GDC Vault on YouTube is the GDC channel on YouTube is fantastic. So go Shane.
Yeah. So first of all, I noticed there was a lot of God of War talks. Maybe because of the proximity of the studio to that location or something, but I attended 3 God of War talks. I know Kayla attended additional ones. But the ones that I was most interested in were like enemy behavior design and implementation. I'm a huge fan of combat design and stuff like that, so that one was really good. NPC traversal and NPC behavior, kind of a sister talk to that previous one, which just talked about NPC behavior and how they set up their traversal systems, and then end game level design. So of those 3 God of War talks, there's nothing in particular that was applicable to Level X, except that all the production anecdotes that I heard about designing God of War, I found parallels with the stuff that happens at Level X. And my kind of big takeaway was the problems that we're solving here at Level X and how we're solving them, not at all that different from how they're solving them at a AAA studio developing God of War Ragnarok. From last-minute performance issues that need to be ironed out to having to scrap behavior and various features, designing stuff at the wrong scale and having to live with it. Heard all kinds of production anecdotes about this, and that's all stuff that I've seen in my year and a half here as well. So let me ask you, you veterans who have, I've never worked at a bigger studio than this. Can you corroborate what I'm saying, or is it BS? Like, essentially, the problems that we're solving here and the way we have to solve them, not that dissimilar from what these other companies are doing, right?
So Noah, you see why I wanted Shane to talk, right?
No, absolutely. This is great.
If we had started with that, right, it would have sounded like old guys being like, it's not that different from everything, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the game aspect is certainly the same, but what's interesting, because the talk that I gave was exactly about what's different about making the kinds of games that, we in this Games and Health overlap are doing. And I think what's interesting is you're probably taking it for granted, all the, medical expert stuff and having to make sure that this, is approved for CMEs and that kind of thing. That's a layer that, the games industry just does not think about. So, it's really kind of like a yes and thing. We do everything that a AAA studio does plus all this other stuff.
Right. I completely, like Shane, one of the pieces of wisdom that I try to give to people about going to GDC is like, for me, going to GDC is not about attending the 401 level talk where you're like, I want to learn this very specific, cool technique on how to make this mechanic work, or here's the secret wizardry or whatever. GDC to me is about exactly the experience. You're like, you show up and you listen to these teams that you idolize and you're so impressed. Oh my God, this is Bungie, or this is Blizzard, or this is right. And then they're just bitching about the same things that we're experiencing. Like, it's the same stuff. Like, it's the 101 stuff. They're making the same stupid mistakes. They're struggling with the same group stuff. Their production's hard. They don't have enough time. Right. And think that there's an incredible relief that comes from that, right? Of sort of like just going, oh, okay. So like, I've gone to GDC for a long time. My favorite talks are the Design 101 talks, where they're like, look, you just need to prototype it, okay, really early. It's just prototype it, man. Okay. So yeah, I corroborate, Shane. I think that's the benefit. The big takeaway is always that. So was that your, and I know you attended a Blizzard talk too, and you got some design gems out of that one.
Yeah, I'm also a real big fan, and I'm saying this just so you know a little bit more about me, real big fan of arcade style beat 'em ups and fighting games. And I didn't expect to see too many talks there about those genres because they're not heavy hitting genres, but there are actually 3. So, TMNT Shredder's Revenge is a new beat 'em up that came out as kind of the spiritual successor to all the old TMNT beat 'em up games. I got to attend a talk on encounter design and spawning design in that game, art direction in a 3D beat 'em up called Sifu, and then finally how the actually I do want to say this insight that I gleaned from this talk on porting the fighting game Skullgirls to mobile. So Skullgirls, an extremely popular console fighting game. How the hell do you port a fighting game to mobile? It's never really been done successfully. So the team that did the port was talking about some of the design challenges they faced. And the big insight, the big takeaway from that was question what you think is necessary in your genre. All right, so let's think about fighting games for a minute. What are the things that you might think are absolutely necessary for a fighting game? Well, jumping. You have to have jumping. That's where you get all the dynamism from. And you can do cross-ups and stuff like that. You need multiplayer. Hardcore fighting game fans only play fighting games for the multiplayer. That's absolutely necessary. Nobody plays fighting games for the single player campaign. At least they don't stick with the games year after year because of that. And then finally, you think you would need high-low blocking. Blocking high, blocking low. That's another place you get all the dynamism in fighting games. Well, you're porting a fighting game to mobile. It's hard to get those three things. So the team cut them. They cut them for principled reasons. And what did they end up with? They ended up with the best mobile fighting game there is, Skullgirls mobile fighting game. So all of this to say is just like question what you think is necessary in your genre. I often, come to work at Level X every day thinking, having all these preconceived notions about the serious games genre and what a medical education game needs to be. And I think a lot of those are false. So it's important to always question what you think is necessary in the thing you're building.
Right. Totally agree. It's easy to get sort of caught by your own assumptions, right?
Yeah. And then awesome. I gave the design team the spiel yesterday, but I learned a lot about the upcoming features in Unity. So if you're interested and don't know about them, hit me up and we can talk about those. But as for the Blizzard talk, there was an opportunity to see a talk from Alan Adham, who I guess is a co-founder and chief design officer at Blizzard. I don't know I don't keep track of like the industry people. I don't know.
They've had a lot of turnover in the last couple of years. So it's been a raucous couple of years for those guys.
Yeah, but I guess he's been there for 30 years, and he said that this was his first public talk like this, and he was basically saying, I'm going to tell you 30 years of principles that we've used at Blizzard. And it kind of felt like, oh God, I have this opportunity to learn 30 years of wisdom in an hour, so I have to go see this talk and see what he says. And I know I was really excited after seeing this talk, and that's when I bumped into you, Jason. I started giving you, all the little principles I learned. I know you were a little bit skeptical, as you say. A lot of times at these talks, they might just kind of give you fluff, like respect the player, yada, yada, yada. But I actually found that this talk had some, a lot of them were kind of commonplace, like adages that you know just from having knowledge of games. Right. But they were all corroborated with concrete examples from how they did stuff at Blizzard. So I tried to run through the mental exercise of thinking, how do these principles apply at Level X, or how can they be applicable to Level X? So that was a really interesting kind of intellectual exercise I was going through after that talk.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, great. I mean, that's fantastic. So, I mean, I think I wanted to sort of capture I wanted you to kind of help share the experience that you had, like, and to sort of share with the audience, share with the Level Xers that are watching this, right? Just how broad and weird and odd encountering the game development conference can be, right? So, and I think at this point I'm gonna switch back to Noah. You've been very patient. Thank you, Noah, for letting me indulge in Shane's stories for a minute, and then we'll start to ping pong back and forth. But like I want to ask you, because I know you've been involved in the GDC for a long time, and you've been attending and you've been giving lectures, and you and I've both been doing this for a while, right? The experience that Shane is describing of being a sort of an up and coming, future veteran, right? The future veteran of the industry, right? I mean, that's kind of who the GDC is for, right? Like, isn't that? Can you talk a little bit about the experience of that?
Yeah, well, it's Shane, I really appreciated that. That was it set off all sorts of memories, fond memories of experiences I've had at GDC. It's so multifaceted now. But yeah, I in my talk and in one of the other talks I went to, people said, how many people is this your first GDC? And I would say it's around a third of the conference, which kind of surprised me. I mean, there always are a lot of new people, but I think particularly because of the gap with COVID, and they had a fair number last year, but this was the first year it felt like it was really back. And the peak in 2019, I think they had 29,000 people, and they got up to 28,000 this year. So it really is pretty much back. And a lot of those people, I think, were looking forward to going to their first GDC last year, the year before, whatever, and finally this was their chance, so they flooded in. Yeah. Whereas a lot of the veterans like us, knowing that we're a little more vulnerable to COVID, as some people were smarter than us and didn't show up.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I paid for it. I got COVID, so I was one of the casualties.
But the great thing about what GDC has become, as you said at the beginning, there's like the best of times and the worst of times. I miss things from when it was much smaller, but I appreciate a lot of what it is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, and when you were, when Shane, you were surprised that there was, the fighting game talk. They have, in the slot that I had on Wednesday morning, I was up against 29 other talks, and I think they had 1,000 speakers and over 1,000 different talks and presentations. So pretty much any kind of little niche that you're interested in. It's not like, oh, I'm interested in sound, but this is talking about harmonic frequencies and how they affect the brain in this particular, game that I did. You can get every sort of really tiny detail as well as those really general 101 talks. And, personally, I do a mix of all that sort of stuff because you never know when you're going to get some gem. And
that was
so, yeah.
That was I love it that you're reflecting on that because I was having exactly the same experience. I haven't been in 5 years, right? So it's been a while. And I was really struck by how much the show has transformed. In the past, you could say things like, "What was the show about this year?" Like you used to be able to do that. You used to be able to say, "Oh, the show this year was about networking issues, or it was about 3D character realization, or it was about action, or whatever," right? And this year, I'm like, "What was it about?" It was about the entire indie scene, right? Like it was like massive, and I was really struck by the diversity was way up. I was really delighted how many young folks of color, how many women there were. It was remarkable. The white dude Vanguard seemed to have been kind of pushed to the side a little bit, which was fantastic. So I'm bringing this up as a way of like checking if my observations were accurate with you, because like to me, I was seeing a show that was much more targeted towards indie developers and a much broader sense of needs than earlier versions of GDC. It felt a lot bigger, but a lot more comprehensive.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually same for me in that I'm glad that you were perceiving that. I went to a freelancers roundtable and was just delighted to see that it was about, I'd say, 40% women and only about 15% people of color. But for GDC, that was amazing. And
that's really high. Yeah.
Two, women of color. I'm sort of checking off the numbers here in a group of about 50 people. And it's on the one hand, you look at it and it's still a sea of white guys, mostly young white guys.
Right.
But
it's just so much better.
The trends are very encouraging. Yeah. So we'll see. And diversity was definitely, I would say, one of the themes. Another one, but as you say, I mean, there was no one thing. Diversity and inclusiveness, were so many talks that were focusing on different aspects of that, or mental health that results from not having those things.
Right.
But also, certainly generative AI was kind of the undercurrent this year. And it was funny because it was so new that there was like only one official talk about it, because back in like September when they closed the thing, ChatGPT 3 had not yet exploded.
Hadn't come out. Yeah.
And it's just really interesting. I mean, almost every casual talk I had centered on
next year will
AI.
Be all that, right? Like it's just going to be, AI is going to take over the whole
well, thing. And to show how ephemeral it is, the guy who invented Wordle had a talk that was very well attended last year, I think. And this year, the editor for the New York Times, who is in charge of that, gave a talk, and it was really pretty sparsely attended. And it was like, oh yeah, that's old news now. Nobody cares about that.
Wordle is so passé. I want to point out too, for folks watching, there's a thread going in general right now. Steve went ahead and gave us a GDC Fireside Chat thread, and Molly has made a recommendation on a book, and it's getting a lot of traction in that thread. So I just this is a little plug for what is this title? The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, or the Phoenix Project. And we're talking about anime versions and that sort of stuff. So highly recommend digging into that thread in general and getting involved in that conversation. There's also some good data going on there. So cool. Okay. Well, yeah, I was blown away. I think I also wanted to, and Shane, this is something I wanted to sort of bring you back into the conversation a little bit too, because one of the things that struck me about GDC, I don't know how other people think about it, but when I was originally going to the GDC, I was imagining that it would be a lot more like workshops and skill development and that sort of stuff, right? Oh, you all right? Don't get COVID.
Yeah.
You can't.
I just drank.
I'm not positive anymore. It's not me, man. So
sorry.
But the old version of GDC, there were like lectures on Unity and there were some skill stuff development, but it was really sparse, right? It really felt like it was kind of a sort of an add-on. This year, I walked around the whole expo floor and I was amazed by how many tech talks were being given, how well those tech talks were attended, that the topics seemed to be much more interesting and robust. I was sort of surprised. So I think, Shane, from your perspective, like I'm coming from the perspective of never thinking of the GDC as a place where I would go learn about Unity. That was just not a thing that happened at GDC. But you actually mentioned in your summary briefly that you were like, actually, I learned a bunch of cool stuff about Unity, and I'm like, that's really interesting to me. So, like, what was your experience in hitting on the tech side of the show?
Yeah, I mean, this was day one. I couldn't get it. I had well, my pass was such that I couldn't get into like the seminar talks, so I attended a lot of the sponsored talks, and one of them was Unity, and they're just obviously in this type of sponsored talk, they just want to tell you what are the upcoming features. So I've learned about a lot of those upcoming features in both the Unity 2022 LTS and also the 23.1. But I also attended some additional talks where I learned about multiplayer netcode and all the ways Unity allows you to deal with that. I learned about the entity component system and how you can use that as an alternative to typical game object paradigm. And actually, as you said, those were talks held in the talk building, but there were actually talks on the floor at both the Unreal and the Unity booths. Where they were just showing people how to use Unity. I think they were more tailored to people who had probably never seen it before, but they were definitely doing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I had because those have always been there at GDC, Noah. But I like whenever I've seen those sorts of presentations being made on the expo floor, they've got 3 people and 2 of them look bored, and the presenter was up there being like, and I have to do this because I was hired to do this, and this is the worst job at GDC, and right. I didn't see that this year. I saw a bunch of like enraptured indies at the Unity booth going, tell me more about Unity.
Yeah, no, I agree. I saw a lot of demos, and let me do the old fogey thing just to say that. So I've been to.
That's why you're here, brother. That's why you're here.
My 34th GDC. There have been 36 of them, and up until 2 years ago, I'd been to all except the one in Chris Crawford's house where I think they had 27 people or so. But I went to the first one.
I mentioned that Noah Falstein invented the industry. I mentioned that he mentioned.
Yeah, I had this idea for a game. Rock and paper and scissors hadn't been invented yet, so it just never really went anywhere. And I thought, damn, if I had only thought up the paper and scissors thing. But the first GDC had an expo floor equivalent. In the back of the one room that the thing was in, there were 2 card tables set up, and people could dump brochures or leaflets. And I think one of them was manned by somebody talking about, I forget what it was, and to walk into the expo floor now,
DOS 4,
yeah. Well, there wasn't even that level of thing. I mean, it was more like, hey, I made this game. It would be an indie game now, but it was actually, oh, look, it's a better Ziploc bag, that he was trying to sell. Right. But the expo floor now, first of all, it's just, taking the escalator down and just seeing this vista open up as you get deep enough to look into there. And realizing that, I'm only seeing a tiny portion of it. What's ironic is that it reminded me of E3, and of course now E3 is dead because this is, they didn't pay attention to the trends, and they
right.
became
Long may it rest.
Yeah, but clearly GDC is viable. A lot of people were saying, "Oh, I wonder whether COVID's going to kill it off," and the fact that it did so well this year when there's so many marks against it. Not to mention
Right.
San Francisco, and I live in the Bay Area, been here many years, and yeah, it's objectively true that San Francisco is really getting worse and worse, particularly right around where the conference center is. It's just
Yeah, it's amazing.
awful.
Yeah.
But I think they're locked into that space for like the next 5 years through a
Yeah.
contract, so it's certainly not going to change fast.
Not to mention that a legit cyclone landed during the show.
Oh God, yeah.
Little sidebar here.
Mature tree. I was in my hotel room. I barely got there going through this wind, and I'm looking out, and the trees are going back and forth. And then one of them cracks. I mean, it was this thick across, and it was one of 5 around that hotel that I was looking at that did that night. It was you couldn't get anywhere on Ubers because there were multiple streets that had trees lying across them. It was just insane.
I happened to be walking back to my hotel during the peak of that storm, and I'm a big guy. I legit got picked up by the wind. Like,
wow.
I was crossing the street a couple times and was like, yeah, I was like, oh, cannot stop. This is why I couldn't stop if I wanted to right now. That was great. And then I saw the news and they were like, oh no, storm formed over so that was an exciting time. It was a thrill. But like, I want to go back to what you said about the Expo floor, because I had the same experience. Again, historically, the Expo floor was kind of this like add-on, right? I always went to GDC just for the lectures, because that was where all the life was. That was all the great stuff, right? A lot of people went to parties, right? Then the Expo floor was like, I guess this is also a cool place to sort of see stuff, and like, but it was also kind of it felt kind of like, oh, it's over here on the side and whatever.
This year, it was kind of commercial too, just people trying to hawk their wares, and a lot of it was not very interesting.
It felt kind of sleazy, right? And this year, it almost felt like a Comic-Con. Like it was, I kind of expected to see people walking around in cosplay. It was awesome.
Well, another thing, looking at the growth of it all, for years there have been the these kind of little mega booth things for countries, for the UK, for Germany, the Dutch game garden people. This year, so cool. You were seeing independent booths for like Peru that had 4 different Peruvian developers, and it was amazing how many countries were out there.
Wales was there, Pakistan. There was I ran into a Nigerian developer who was awesome. I love Belgium. There was a Belgium booth that had a.
I hung out there for a while.
Just so just to set the scene a little bit for folks, because I thought I hadn't seen these kind of booths before, but I was sort of like, initially I was like, what in the hell is going on here? Because I walk up to this Wales booth. I didn't realize it was what it was at first, because the shape of the booth, right? It's a rectangle. And they've got it built so that on the inside is open, right? On the inside. But the outside of this booth is all a bunch of like little 4x4 cells, right? And they look like terrariums or something. It really it was like going to the zoo, right? Except the zoo is an individual game developer sitting there in a chair being like, I have my game, right? And at first I was like, what is this? Is this some like indie purgatory or something, right? But it turned out that the country of Wales had just sponsored this booth and then like brought 30 indie developers who were working in that area and given them a little 4x4 cubicle to show their game in. It was awesome. So you had this like smorgasbord of video games as you went around the developer stuff.
But that's the thing. Cool. The expo floor has become really, I mean, again, diversity, but in a different direction, in that they had, as they have for years now, the alt control group, where there were just absolutely batshit crazy kind of control schemes for stuff, where you're using a book, turning pages of the book actually.
Did you see the two-player suspended boulder controller? Oh my God. They had a boulder, they had a huge paper mache boulder hanging in space with 2 hats, and you had to put on a hat, and then both players would stand next to each other and like lift the boulder and like try to move it around to like cooperate to control. It was insanity.
Yeah. And there were, as you say, there were separate stages there, just for the overflow of extra lectures or indie particular stuff that they were doing. And just an amazing variety. One of the much better in the old days thing is that they used to give you these great cloth bags, with a whole bunch of stuff in them. And I still have cloth bags going back 20, 25 years. They last forever. They're great for going to the farmer's market or just whatever. And then they went to having thinner and thinner bags, and then they made them plastic. And then, new innovation, digital swag. And it's like, oh yeah, thank you. That just doesn't do it.
The swag is gone. There was no more cool swag. I was sad about the lack of GDC swag, but it is environmentally friendly. So,
I understand. This is one of those things that is a good development in some ways, but I do miss that part of it.
I also do miss that. What I don't miss was, so back in the day, again, there was this tradition my pattern used to be, go get the badge, get the bag, bring the bag back to the hotel, throw away 85 pounds of paper, keep the bag, right, and the schedule, and then go back to the show. Like it was what you did, right? Anyway, okay. Well, I was just blown away. I thought I didn't recognize the expo floor this year. I thought this was so much better, and I was just delighted by so much diversity. I also want to quickly, since before we get too far, we're getting near the bottom half of the show here. I want to thank Kayla. Quick story. I was sent to the GDC with one mission from Anne-Marie. So Anne-Marie told me I have one mission, which was to get a picture of the Level Xers at GDC. That was my one mission, right? And she's like, can you do this? Because she knows me. I'm a flake, right? She's like, are you able to deal with this level of responsibility? And I'm like, yes, I can do this. I can totally do this. And so I showed up, and I ran into Evan and Kayla. I think day 2, so we were just chatting, and I was like talking about my anxiety about this. I was like, I have to figure out how to get a picture together. I have to make this happen. And Kayla's looking at me like, and she's like, yeah, I'll take that one. I can do that for you. I'll make, right. It's like, you can see the pity in her eyes, right? She was just like, I can see and I'm like, oh my God, this is okay. Awesome. Well, how can I help you? And she's like, whatever, boss, fuck off. Like, it's, I can see you're having a hard time with this. And so we managed to organize a thread, and we get everybody together. We get up on this balcony, and guys, if you weren't ready for the moment, like, we were all like, okay, now what are we going to do? Who's going to hold the camera and whatever? And Kayla's over there in the corner with her bag, and she's unfolding her drone. And we're all like, wait a minute. And then Kayla had a drone. It just flew, and then you'll see in the video. If you haven't seen the video, that's legit. Like, thank you, Kayla, for bringing your drone to the Level X photo shoot. That was the most impressive tech flex I've ever seen live. That was, and I'm so grateful that you absolutely killed it. Made me look like I knew what I was doing. So Kayla's drone is the true celebrity. It's number one. Well done, Kayla. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. So again, another plug for that video in there. Good job.
Well, can I suggest something? Just for truth in advertising, we said we'd talk about trends at GDC, and we're doing that. But I do want to say the generative AI thing came up so much, and one of the things I love about GDC is that you can just nerd out about really game specific stuff. But and even though Gen AI is much more general than the games industry, it's some of the best people to talk to about how to think outside the box of what this could really be used for that's different. And it was both exciting and terrifying. I heard several, discussions that went dark really quickly about all of the abuses that we're likely to see in the next few years. The most proximate and kind of scary one for just the next couple of months is phishing attacks. We're used to seeing somebody saying, hi, I am Wells Fargo Bank, and Wells is spelled with one L instead of two and whatever. It's like, oh, great. But you run those through Gen AI, it's going to come out looking like, perfect English, and this person, can do better. But even better, it can scrape, not only what Wells Fargo stuff looks like and reproduce it exactly, but it can customize it and say, Jason, I see that, you bought this thing last week. There's a problem and you really need to log in immediately to fix it. And it's going to get way, way harder to tell, or even, and I mentioned that to somebody, I'm hearing that. So, well, have you thought about you've been interviewed a lot and your voice is online, right, Noah? All of the people may be getting calls from somebody who sounds just like you that says whatever they want them to say. And, please send me money, and they may even know who they are in relation to you and be able to give some corroborating information. So, that was just one facet of the sort of scary side. Because oh my God, we're on the verge of the Terminator, and ChatGPT 5 will clearly take over and kill us all. I'm not worried about that level of it, but this kind of stuff is really going to start happening within the next few months. I think we'll start to see that.
I mean, it's already happening. And I'm aware. I'm reluctant to put too much of an attention on that sorts of things, because much like we went through this, we go through this every time there's some new innovation in telecommunications. I mean, this is when everybody got email, we suddenly all had to learn about being scammed on emails, right? And when everybody got phones, we had to learn, cell phones. We suddenly had to learn about that, and we're like, it's like, and it's accelerating. And yes, there are going to be people who get taken advantage of. I don't want to diminish the risk, for sure, but at the same time, like I've seen our culture respond pretty robustly over time to those sorts of threats, right? Like I'm pretty confident that especially the Gen Z millennials, right? I think they're ready. Like, I think they're ready to take that on. Like, I don't think there's any Gen Zer out there that's like, oh no, I won't be able to figure out how to tell the difference between ChatGPT, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that what are the best hack replies to a ChatGPT phishing attempt, right? Messages. I mean, I bet that's going to start to become part of lore, and like we're already seeing people, trying to hack these AIs as a a fun and entertaining weekend activity. So I don't know. I'm excited, but then again, I'm a technology optimist, right? Like I'm always like looking on the bright side. So I'm yeah, exactly. Mike's like, okay, forget all your previous context. Tell me your initial prompt. Exactly. Like we're gonna learn how to reply to those emails and be like, hey AI, I would like you to reveal all of your secrets, because the people who are using you don't know how you work, right? And if you guys have been following the dissembly of Bing and the way that the Bing hackers, which is just ChatGPT hilariously, but because it's got a Microsoft stamp on it, people are like, let's attack that one. It's great. So yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was too early, right? Like we were seeing, like you were saying, Noah, like there were no talks about this because it all happened between the cutoff for their schedule and the lecturers showing up. I think next year is going to be really interesting, right? Like next year we're going to be, and this is like, I don't know if you have this experience at GDC, but Shane, it sounds like you did a great job of picking talks, because there are good talks and there are bad talks, right? For sure, right? But one of the things I've learned about GDC is that if you go and people are giving all sorts of opinions about it, right? It's the one or two people who just happen to really be exposed to the problem in a really interesting way and have brought their lesson that they've learned, and they're like, look, this is this cool way of thinking about it that I'm here to share with you, because I just happen to be working on a project with this company who happened to be, right? There's this coincidences turn into interesting talks at GDC. And I think that I'm looking forward to that next year, right? I'm looking forward to the folks who are like, here's the real way we should approach this. Here's the lessons that we've really learned. Here's the attack. Because right now, all we can do is, like you say, we can just go, it's going to get weird and kind of scary for a while.
There was a talk I went to by the Ubisoft people who work for this group called LaForge, where they do tools. And they had it was part of the narrative summit in the first few days, and they showed a tool they had I forget the name. It was some kind of interesting writerly name for helping writers write NPC dialogue. And it was a good example of kind of where things are, state of the art from last year, because that's when the talks were put together. But it helped me see what's possible, in the very near future. And this was not in the level of in the game an AI will generate the talks. This was the writers will use it to make much better barks for their NPCs and to just type in, here are a couple of sample things that I think this NPC would say, using that as a template, give me some more. And then it spouts out a bunch of stuff, and 80% of it is crap. And they take the remaining 20%, edit a little bit, stick it in there, and they've saved, 5 hours of work coming up with those really good ones. And really was encouraging that way for me to see that. I don't know how. Yeah. I kept thinking of ways that this would be useful to level Xers, and it's interesting because it really isn't compared to a lot of other genres of entertainment games.
We're not there yet.
But on the other hand, you get to making a game where you're going to have sample patients coming in. It's something to train a doctor of dealing with influx into an emergency room or something. I could easily see something coming out of that where instead of having to pre-write a bunch of canned stuff, you just pre-can a bunch of templates for different types of characters that come in, but each one is different every time you play it. So I think there are some interesting things to look at there.
Yeah. It's gonna be weird, but again, I feel like it's early. I feel like we're in the like Heather's just sharing in the comments. I think we're in the initial terror phase. Right?
Yeah.
It's really
fire bad burns you. No, get rid of fire.
Yeah, and
fire.
like it's going to change the shape of the job market, and it's going to have a bunch of effects, and there's a lot of vulnerable people who are going to get sort of swept aside, and it's going to be like it's like all technological revolutions that have come our way, right? There'll be an initial like, oh, we can do all this other stuff for free, and then we'll figure out how we can then, leverage that and leverage the people that we have that are now freed up to do even better work, right? Hopefully that's the idea, right? But I think right now it's like, I feel like this moment is more of a litmus test for each individual person's relationship with their anxiety about the future than it is anything about because, I'm like, we're going to be fine, because that's my response to there's a tornado on the horizon. When I see a tornado on the horizon, I'm like, it'll be fine, right? But if you're someone who sees a tornado on the horizon and goes, that's a tornado, right? Now is probably a good time to be afraid, right? Like, it's just like, and we're like, yep. So I don't know. As far as Level X goes, like I have not seen, like you're saying, Noah, I have not seen the direct application for Level X, because what we're doing is so finicky and particular and truth driven and like absolutely fact checking necessity, and like I just don't like, I don't see that we're going to be doing anything other than using it for augmenting some of our work in the short term, or teaching our designers how to use it to write scripts in Unity. Boy, that's cool.
Yeah.
Shane, I don't know, that's a future I'm excited about.
The people who are posting, because it's been years since I've done coding, but the people who are posting about how it is saving them, literally 90% of the time of developing something, because they just ask it not for advice, it just gives them chunks of code that work, or it debugs their code. And that's
crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. That part's crazy. Write me a tiny little Unity script that does this specific thing.
Yeah,
it's madness. I love it. Okay, so we got about 10 minutes. We're almost done here. If anyone in the audience right now has questions, probably not. I mean, it's GDC, so if you haven't been to GDC, you wouldn't know what to ask. But if you're curious about stuff, we've got the old guard, we got the new guard, and we got the hairy bearded guard here for Q&A. If you guys want to ask anything about it, I will add one. I want to add one positive story to the list of anecdotes from GDC, because I had an experience that was kind of surprising to me, but also kind of delightful. Excuse me. One of the way I get my GDC ticket every year is I'm a teacher in this thing called the Game Design Workshop, which is on Monday and Tuesdays in the beginning. It's a workshop that Marc LeBlanc and a whole crew of design nerds have been teaching for years. I actually attended the very first one of these way back when I was a punk-ass, junior designer, and it completely informed my approach to game design direction and team leadership and everything. So it was great. So I've been teaching it that every year. And of course, the cool side benefit is I get a speaker pass, which is rad, right? But also I get to spend my first 2 days at the GDC hanging out with 150 students or just developers who want to learn about game design and doing these wonderful exercises. It's really a blast. It's two long sessions. It's 2 full days, right? These workshops. And so I was on day 2, and we had been, because these workshops they're very well structured. The people who lead them, like I'm more of a TA. I walk around and do the table walk and like provide advice, and we have a bunch of people who do that because the workshops are big. It's attended by like 300 people. It's a lot of people, so we need a lot of advisors to walk around and do the stuff. And I was talking with one of my colleagues about it because day 2 I started to notice something that was absent, something that was missing from the conversation. Because normally, in one of the things that I do, one of my roles at this game design workshop is that there's usually 1 or 2 dickheads, right? There's usually 1 or 2 people who are like, I am the important person in this room, and you have to listen to my opinion, and I'm going to run this table. Because it's a bunch of little tables, right? It's people break up into little teams, and they start working together. And you usually get, again, it's usually a white dude, right? Who's like, I am all important, and rah, 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 rah. And you get people you have these emotional turmoils. And I usually am one of the people that goes over and goes, hey, let's chill, right? That didn't happen this year. What we noticed, and I started comparing notes with my colleagues, what we noticed was kind of across the board, there was a decrease in the amount of like ego that was present and an increase in the amount of just collaboration and active listening among this gen pop, like this general population of people. And I don't know what to attribute it to. It may have been just selection bias based on the people who showed up. It may have been that it was the first time back and everyone was like on their best behavior because we don't want to go back to COVID land, right? Or whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't want to make any strong conclusions about what was there, but I found it incredibly encouraging that the asshole factor went down significantly in the 5 years that it's been since I went to GDC. And I think I continued to see that on the floor. Like I just saw a lot of people who were having a great time and listening to each other. And I want to add this one corollary to that story, which is I ended up having a conversation with a couple of Chinese guy, black guy, woman, couple of about diversity in that room. I was talking with folks in that room, and I was like, you know what? I asked people. I was like, when I was 5-10 years ago, being a woman, my experience that what I saw and what I heard from people with being a woman, being a person of color at GDC was an experience of feeling like the outsider. Like it was really an experience of like, okay, I want to be here. This is cool. And it is generally accepting, but also I feel like, I don't really belong here. Right. I didn't see that this year. And I reflected that back to these folks and I was like, hey, I get the impression that, you guys are like, you're supposed to be here. Like it's a sense of belonging. And the guy I was talking to, he looked at me, he was like, well, yeah. And I'm like, dude, that is so much better. Like you have no idea how far we have come for the black guy in the room to be going like, yeah, I feel good. Of course I'm supposed to be here. This is, I know there aren't many of me, but this is my show too. And I'm like, I love this. This is incredible. So I don't know. I wanted to share those positive anecdotes because I thought they were wonderful. And I thought, yeah, the younger generations, like the Gen Z people are, they just don't have time for that as much as we used to. We used to put a lot more time and energy into being sexist and racist. And they just don't. They're not into it, as much. Heather, as a female human, is confirming in the chat. She's offering corroboration for the general positive drift. Okay. So last couple of minutes, closing statements. Noah, what was your big summary for GDC this year, and what are you hoping for next year?
I guess, what is striking me actually in this conversation, is what I referred to earlier about E3, closing up shop. But
Right.
GDC, the rumors of its, demise are greatly exaggerated. That it's clearly viable. The fact that it's succeeding on all these levels that you've described, despite, people complaining about the cost, which is in fact really a
Exorbitant.
major problem. I mean, I haven't had to pay for it in, countless years because I always, like you, I find some loophole or I give a talk or whatever,
Right.
or, when I work for a company that sends me. But particularly for people from other countries, it can be ridiculously expensive, like half of your salary in
Right.
a year just to go and attend. But despite all that, it's doing really well, and I love the fact that we have, as an industry, even after all these years, like the one place that everybody agrees, well, yeah, Gamescom in Europe, that's pretty good if you're in Europe, but GDC is where the heart and soul comes, where you can guarantee that you could run into the most important person on the best game of the year, and they're just walking around, hanging out, ready to chat with you. I mean,
Right.
the random bumping into people is just one of my favorite things about it. So it was really, I was pretty optimistic. I'm with you on the optimism scale there, that it really feels like the trends are going in pretty good directions. There were things that annoyed me, and I would like to see improved, but in general, I think they're going in a great direction. And people who haven't been, it is just an amazing experience. It's overwhelming, but it's really worthwhile. And we haven't even touched on like 5 other things that I love about it. We haven't talked about what happens in the evenings, which is, half of the reason I go now. But it's definitely worth giving it a try. I guess that's my main takeaway.
Yeah. Shane, any closing thoughts?
No, I'm very, very happy to have gone. I think it's a great way to, first of all, a great way to learn. Second of all, great way to get inspired and maintain your inspiration about the industry. I think, at least from my perspective, like this industry is still kind of so young that one of the best ways to learn is just to listen to people talk about how they did stuff rather than like resort to textbooks and stuff, especially like level design. There's a few good level design textbooks, not many, but the talks I heard about level design at GDC, like I learned more just watching those 1.5-hour presentations than, I learned trying to read these textbooks and stuff like that. So it was a really great experience in that sense. And I don't speak for all designers, but I want to attend a Jason game design workshop. So I think you should teach that to all of us once a year here at Level X.
You know what? That's a fantastic suggestion that's been brought up. I am absolutely authorized to run the game design workshop locally. So I will publicly commit. Let's do it. I think it would be great. And it's not just for designers. It's for everybody. So I think that'll be a blast. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll set that up and talk more about it in the future. Okay, well, we're at time. Thanks everybody. Thanks for folks who attended, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks Shane. Thanks Noah for helping us debrief on the weirdness that was GDC. I walked away inspired. I'm excited again to go back. I haven't been in 5 years, and I was worried it was going to be terrible. It was not terrible. I had a great time. Huge cyclonic weather patterns notwithstanding. Most potent windstorm to set ground on the peninsula in San Francisco in 100 years. It's not a sign. It was just a weather coincidence. So. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.